like to welcome Bob and Ken out. These two individuals were invited by Mike Jones. They're going to talk to us today about internet scale identity, collaboration, and higher education. And they will be covering some of their experiences on this for the next 40 minutes. And then afterwards, we'll give some time to you for Q&A. So I'd like to welcome Bob and Ken. Bob.
All right. Let's see, just a little bit of background about who we are and where we're from. While my computer thrashes. Let's see, we are from an organization called Internet2. That is a consortium of a whole lot of universities, 250 or so, essentially all the big universities in the US. Membership organization also has a lot of corporate and other kind of partner members, among which is Google. So Internet2 does a whole lot of different things. The main thing that it does is that it's known for is high-speed networking and research in advanced uses of high-speed networking. So it's running multi-gigabit, super-duper, lambda division, blah 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 networks all around the country, peering with things around the world. Ken and I are not from that part of Internet2. We are from something called the Internet2 Middleware Initiative, which is working on promoting identity and access management best practices and new approaches and research and cool stuff for all those universities and lots of partners around the world. So that has focused on a number of different things. We've had a PKI initiative, like everybody has had to have, a web sign-on, done a lot of work with SAML. We'll be talking a lot about that, and federation, directories, all kinds of stuff. So we are here, again, at Mike's invitation. We got involved with Mike Jones, sorry, around the use of SAML and our Shibboleth software for federated access to Google Apps for Education, which is obviously a big interest for those of us in higher ed. That led, among other things, to Google being a sponsor, financial sponsor of the Shibboleth software project. That's our main Internet2 middleware software project, and so we're appreciative of that. So Mike suggested that we might come here and talk about this stuff because people are interested in authentication and authorization, where it's going. Certainly we're extremely interested in following up and having conversations, or even joint projects or whatever that might turn into. That's what we're supposed to do in Internet2, is promote that kind of thing. So, with no further ado, a bunch of things. Federation has been a big deal for us for a long time. So a lot of what we're talking about is where we're at with actual reasonably high security federation among a lot of parties in this country and around the world, and how our SHIB stuff fits into that. A bit about user-centric stuff, because it's all the rage. And even though somebody said it should be banned from use and banned from talks, here it is. I'll be offering inflammatory opinions on things like InfoCard and OpenId. We'll be talking some about how that relates to what we do in higher ed, and then shifting slightly, some work that we're doing on support of collaboration and how that's done, how we envision that to be done, and what the requirements are for supporting access control for collaborations across a huge spectrum of stuff that we do in higher ed, and how that relates to group and privilege management in particular. So, internet identity, I think I'm told that people here are pretty savvy with this stuff. Who can name all 7 of Kim Cameron's laws of identity? Nobody? Oh, come on. perhaps people have been exposed to that. I think this this stuff is pretty common across a lot of people looking at this. People want to sign on less. Fewer usernames and passwords across all those darn websites. Across all those blogs that you want to leave comments on. Is the hot thing these days. Privacy is a big deal for us, and we think in the world in general. Just because you want to be able to sign on to lots of things doesn't mean that all those things should be able to correlate all your activities and track everything about you all the time. And so we want to build an infrastructure that supports people's interest in that kind of disconnection. There's as we institutionally, and a lot of what we do and we're talking about here is from an institutional perspective. We are representing the interests of our 200 top-end universities, and more broadly higher education and research in general. These are substantial enterprises with enterprise interests, but also interest in supporting collaboration in the world. So to do that stuff, we can't just have a one-size-fits-all identity scheme. We know if we're dealing with alumni, and we support 100,000 alumni at my university. The ways of dealing with them and their identities is going to be different than our financial officers or our medical researchers or anything else. So we need a range. Ease of deployment, ease of use. Stuff has to be able to get out there in order to be useful. So an entirely too simplistic slide about dividing the world into federated and user-centric, sort of based on what's actually happening out there in the world today. Like I say, we'll be talking a lot about what we mean by the federated space. In broad terms, federation typically means taking advantage of some sort of large organizational identity management system and being able to extend it out to work with partners outside the enterprise. Often that just means the ability to sign on. We've put a lot of effort into going beyond that to actually send user attributes. We have all kinds of important elements of business processes that can be enabled by that, and we'll be talking more about that. Again, if you're talking about an organization dealing often contractually with another organization, then often this will be associated with a contract or some other kind of arrangement, and you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing with your institutional policies. So this stuff can be difficult to get arranged. There's a whole user-centric world people are no doubt familiar with. OpenID is kind of the hot topic these days. Just set it up, be promiscuous. What we want is for people to assert their own identities, not necessarily be tied to organizations. So those cases are things that we'll be going into more. And they're both growing, right? Even though some people would like to say that SAML is dead and other things. What we see in our environment, for our purposes and the communities we serve, that stuff is growing big time. And I will zoom through here. Again, making the point that the federations. Now, I'll change the meaning slightly of the word federation here. Federations, as we have come to use them in research and higher ed, are not sort of bilateral as they almost always are in the corporate world, where you set up an arrangement with some kind of outsourced supplier and that's it. We are forming and growing multilateral federations. We'll be giving more information about that in a bit. That serve a whole community, right? Creating a community around not just the identity providers, as we are acting as big universities, but also the service providers that are out there that are consuming that stuff are also part of our community. We're forming that stuff together and developing the arrangements, which again are often, are obliged to be contractual, specifying the responsibilities of the parties in order to build those things. All right. So a bit about SHIB, a software project that has been going on for 6 or 7 years now. We just released 2.0 beta today after a entirely too long gestation period. Widely deployed. We are, mumbling about maybe 1,000 sites or more at this point around the world using SHIB. OpenSAML is the library component there that implements SAML, has been adopted, we believe, under the Apache license by a lot of other open source and commercial products for doing SAML stuff. SHIB, we have been focusing on getting to the SAML 2.0 specification. The main Shibboleth architect, Scott Cantor, was also the main author of the SAML 2.0 spec, knows it pretty well. So we believe we'll be delivering a pretty good implementation. Again, there are lots of ways to do SAML. Any particular implementation might support some, we think that ours will do a lot of those and be able to provide a lot of glue for a lot of people. One bullet point there is that we are seeing the beginnings of support service business because enough people are deploying it that they are prepared to pay money to folks to make it happen. So that's a good thing. Happy to do more of that. Federations, as I was describing, are happening. It's a fascinating thing that they have. That while we've been pretty successful at growing stuff here in the U.S., internationally, they have been growing even more. Let's see. Let me mostly skip over this one. Federations, when we are trying to build multilateral federations at a technical level, have to agree on all these things. So part of what we do as the In-Common Federation, and let me just skip to that right now. Let me just show internet2.edu is the organization I was describing. Here's the In-Common Federation page. This is, again, it's operated by Internet2 on behalf of higher education in the US and our partners. Has a whole lot of participants. Again, there are 3,000 higher ed institutions in the US, and our market is all of them. So 44 is better than 1%. But we think we've got many of the most important ones, big schools that carry a lot of weight with their peers and with vendors. So these are all places that have done all the legal work and setup work to technical setup work to participate in the federation. Any of them is able to sign on without further ado to any of these resources out here. Again, developing more of those all the time. And if you care about our policies and practices, there they are, etc. Okay. Let me change back now. So the federation, then, part of what we do there is make sure all that stuff happens, basically solving that for the entire community once, rather than each of them having to do that separately with each of the places that they want to federate with. Policies are a big deal in this stuff. As people, you should know, if you've ever got into this, the technical part takes a while, and then you hand it to the policy people, and they take a really long time. So a lot of what we do is to try and create a framework for what the policy should be among organizations. A lot of that is knowing what not to set policy on, what to leave to contractual arrangements that might be arranged between members separately from the federation itself, building on it. Some of this involves standardizing attributes. We had done a lot of work prior to forming In-Common on a standard vocabulary to cover basic elements of what we thought would be interesting about people entries between interorganizationally in higher ed, and that was able to be applied directly once we were able to use SAML to do that. and it's called EduPerson. So that's been widely adopted, both in the U.S. and internationally. Levels of assurance is another big deal. Again, I mentioned the notion that one level, sort of level of risk management and cost applied to the assurance applied to users doesn't cut it. So we, in particular, have been driven to do stuff in that area by our work with the U.S. federal government, which cares a lot about levels of assurance and defined 4 standard levels that have become widely used across the biz. From some points of view, they care a lot more about it than is good for them, but they are the government, so they tend to care. That is another emerging element of what's going on in our federation agreements. Okay, so here is a slide of showing growth and adoption in a particular national federation, higher ed federation in Switzerland, run by the National Swiss Research and Education Network support organization, SWITCH, essentially showing from 2004 to 2006, more or less, complete coverage in the higher education space there. This is something that has been pretty straightforward for the European national research and education support organizations to accomplish because of their national support structure for those activities. It's much easier for them to say, we're going to do this and get that level of coverage. We don't have that kind of national level of support here in the U.S., for better or for worse. So we are obliged to grow by persuasion rather than by government mandate. But there are deployments in all those countries listed there. They take different shapes. They're not all using the same kind of software. The Norwegian one, for example, using the Sun product in a centralized deployment, not doing it in a sort of per campus distributed federated fashion like we are here in the US, but they're able to participate internationally with a number of providers. And what are we doing with that stuff? A lot of different things. One of the focuses initially was access to licensed library content. So big providers like Elsevier and their ScienceDirect.com site that essentially everybody licenses. There's a lot of access problems around that stuff that aren't met by the IP address method that is typically used today. Federation offers a good way to do that. Those providers have been pretty good about jumping on the boat. Still a ways to go with that stuff, but the biggest international use cases for federated access have been those providers. But there's a lot of others too. The music services that have come and may be gone now, Napster, et cetera. Serving campuses have been a big use case. Other just service providers in the higher ed sector, homework handling, plagiarism checking service, career references, all kinds of things that are serving our market that where federation applies. Google Apps for Education, in fact, is one of those, and we have been working on that coming on and joining the federation for a while now, and I think we are nearing completion on that. One of these weeks here soon. Okay, so I showed the InCommon site. Here's a little bit more about it. Again, just serving the U.S., we've found it useful to have these federations be nationally based. Again, a lot of the things with just dealing with policies, privacy policies in particular, and making contracts are much easier if you're dealing with it nationally. Although of course there are lots of international use cases even with the U.S. universities. There is, a governing body. It's a real activity with lots of administrative help and lawyers and all those things to keep it going, support staff, et cetera. Again, we are estimating coming near 2 million users, counting everyone available from all those universities. Again, all able to do reasonably strong authentication across the system to all those providers. A significant one that is coming on soon also is the National Institute of Health, with a number of different applications that National Library of Medicine, et cetera, that are important to higher ed. Again, that involve dealing with quite a bit of federal government policy in order to get NIH to sign up. But they're very excited and are leading the way, in fact, with a number of other agencies that we're interested in. So we're excited about that one. Another member that will be joining soon is our good friends at Microsoft, who have an application in software distribution that we think will be pretty popular. So it's definitely getting there.
Want to show the wiki? The wiki?
Okay.
Yeah.
And this might be the time to show the wiki. Our sort of most visible highly federated application is our instance of Confluence Wiki, which has been federation enabled at Internet 2. So again, just another Confluence, but when I go to log in, if all works well, if the demo gods are on my side, then I am presented with, the bane of federation, which is selecting my identity provider, where I'm from. So note that this particular application is a member of a bunch of different federations in the US, UK, Australia, Sweden, et cetera. So if I just want the ones in the US, then there's the list. And I happen to be from University of Washington, so I'll select. And now I'm presented with my familiar University of Washington sign-on page, or at least I hope it is. I hope I'm not being phished. I'm sure I wouldn't be. So I won't, well, what the hell, I may as well. So now I'm back, and so I'm signed on. Notable that this site has about 400 users, again, all federated. About 40% of them are actually from an identity provider that is a really interesting thing. Here it is, called Protect Network. That is an open identity provider. Anybody can sign up, get an ID there. So it's really useful as we collaborate. If we say, if you're from a federation member, that's great. If you're not, go and get one here, right? It's open, no problem. So about 40% of the users are in fact from this one. The other 60% from real federation members. Again, about 2/3 of those, I think, in the US, and the other third international from all over the place.
If you go back to the dashboard for a second, I noticed that Jeff Hodges had been using his
right.
Jeff was at VeriSign.
Actually at
Newstar.
Newstar. Yes, I don't know. Anybody know Jeff Hodges? He's here. Must have been interested in our SHIB announcement. Okay. So, I think in the interest of time, well, maybe just to mention the, I've talked about some of these things, the LOA thing. levels of assurance is a big deal in, as I said, in the federation space now. How do you, given that a participating site might be, any kind of site. We have a bunch of universities, and maybe universities are all pretty good and all do vaguely the same kind of things, but there's Protect Network. What kind of place are they? At my university, we have all kinds of IDs. We have my ID that's pretty well secure. When we know that there really is a Bob Morgan and that really is his ID and he really is a staff member, et cetera. We also have lots of IDs that are handed out randomly for wireless access or whatever around the campus. So it's important to us as running identity management inside our site to be able to distinguish those somehow for application consumption purposes. The federation aspect of this has helped to structure that, partly because of our good friends at the federal government providing this numbered LOA structure. So in common, it will be defining those terms for itself shortly and having some kind of certification program. We're not quite sure how for sites to become accredited at one of those levels for particular elements of their community. And we think that will enable a lot of applications that care about higher assurance. Medical records in particular is a big thing. And things going on at the federal government, grant management, et cetera. You want to do a couple?
Yeah. And just one or two comments that I accrued along the way. When Bob mumbled about the breadth of deployment, we don't honestly know because it's open source and people download and deploy. When you Google on SHIB, one of the interesting things that comes up is there's evidently an extremely large deployment between the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. And a couple of years ago in DC, I was giving shtick, and these two guys from DHS and DOJ walked up at the end and said, "We're really interested in your software." And I went, "I hope not." And they said, "Why?" And I go, "Well, I'm from Berkeley, and I came out in the 60s. This is privacy preserving." And they went, "No, this is secrecy preserving. We are now under federal mandate to share lots and lots of information between DHS and DOJ, and we want to do that. But it's not like we want to reveal our operatives to each other. We definitely don't. What we want to reveal is that we have a user who is authenticated at an extremely strong level of authentication who has the authorization to access the content on the other agency's site." So you're onto something when you're trying to solve privacy and you get a side effect of solving another problem that's important to people. So that was an interesting aspect. Another thing, Bob was mentioning EduPerson. As part of our long and ultimately painful interactions with the federal government, maybe that's redundant. One of the things that we worked on was developing a US person object class. And all of you are good CS folks, so you know the famous saw from the CS community about there's only 3 numbers that matter in CS, 1, 2, and many, and it's metadata correlation, 1, 2, and schema. So schema have emerged as really, really important in this space. And so we developed a US person schema that had, among other things, it had very little in it. We're very parsimonious in our object classes. But one of the things that it did have in there was a full disability class, which turned out to be very important for the federal government, who has an obligation to present information to all of the citizens, regardless of their handicaps and challenges, and the fact that we had attributes that would allow still preserving privacy, to be able to display things to Braille readers or to vocal readers, or to compensate for your color blindness or your learning disabilities, was a very important tool. So think schema, as I'm sure you guys do. Third thing to note from Protect Network, et cetera, is that the transfer of this from enterprise to enterprise services to citizen to enterprise or citizen to government is a very important step in all this process. And we had fond hopes that ultimately banks would be identity providers. because they happen to have a trust relationship, they happen to have auditors, you happen to have a trust relationship with them where you give them a lot of money and they give you a piece of paper in return. That said, the banks have not fully stepped up to this business, partially because some of them are still waiting for the gods of PKI to arrive, and partially because they're busy doing other stuff. But certainly some banks like Wells Fargo are deeply involved in this and helping to foster a citizen solution. Lastly, as we get into the federation space, looking out your door, the University of California system has formed a federation, UC Trust. All the schools are in that. But they're also members of InCommon, and so we're starting to handle some of these issues of federation peering, et cetera. And for those of you who came from the TCP/IP land, we're back to BGP one more time with autonomous systems, upper level of the protocol stack. The Cal State system is about to join as 22 universities with or 20, yeah, I guess the universities. And they have a very important initiative called the California Digital Marketplace, which may reach this out to a lot broader community. So with that, we're now diving into relationships among federations. We had a meeting in Prague.
You really need to buzz through here. So.
Okay. Yeah. So when we talk about okay, the meeting in Prague was 15 to 20 R&E federations, 5 continents now, all doing pretty much the same stuff. Some anchors out there are these federal guidelines, NIST 863 on identity proofing and acts of authentication. That gives us some common ground. EduPerson gives us some common ground. International privacy issues, EU privacy directives, et cetera, gives us some dissimilar ground, and we have to work through those issues. So we got together in Prague, lots and lots of alignment. It was really a pretty remarkable meeting. Liberty was there. You can see the topics. We covered privacy policies, which are right now distilling down to consent agreements. But ultimately, as we were chatting back there, we have to worry about distributed denial of privacy attacks by having service providers correlate information about a particular identity that's come through the door. Shibboleth is pretty distinctive in its ability to oscillate those identifiers so that you can't make those kinds of attacks. But that's an important aspect of this. Dispute resolution, if we have international peering, where the hell do we resolve the disagreements? Do we go to The Hague? We want to go to ACM, actually, is where we want to go, but we'll talk about that afterwards. The next steps in this process are the UK drafting an analysis of the international peering agreements, and we're all moving. As Bob indicated, we had a long and ultimately fruitless relationship with the federal government about the space, but the relics that we constructed along the way are very important. So the SAML 2.0 profile for interoperability is moving into the eGov SIG. The attribute schema is moving into the eGov SIG at Liberty. And we'll see if they're any better at it than the federal government. We're holding judgment, but we're participating strongly. We'll participate with anybody in this space. I'll slide this back for a second. So can we go up? Actually,
did you want to go before that?
Yeah. When the question really is, how heavyweight do you get this stuff along the way? Well, we'll get into the OpenID space in a second. Very lightweight, almost vaporware weight. Lots and lots of good uses for that. Lots and lots of instances where you need audit, where you need the ability to track information. So the answer at the end of the day is going to be lots of different kinds of identity, hopefully presented under a common veneer, maybe an InfoCard, card space kind of veneer, some other kind of veneer. But we see these as very complementary, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can integrate OpenID and federated identity. There is now a lot of work done where you can come in with a federated identity and go out with a URL of your choice. So with that, maybe I should turn it back to Bob.
All right. Thanks. Okay. User-centric, I think people here probably have some idea of what people say that stuff means. I don't want to so much get into, especially since our time is short, get into details. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and in 2 activities and representing universities, we certainly are interested. I've been attending all the IIWs from the beginning, et cetera, following that. So let me just make a couple of points on this slide here. What are the important things that people mean about user-centric. From my point of view, there really are two that are key. One is that you have a notion of owning whatever it is your identity is, as opposed to having it be tied to a particular app or website like Facebook, or even when you've externalized the authentication, and I'm able to use R.L. Morgan at Washington.edu to sign on to lots of things like that wiki, or various other externalized websites from the UW, and lots of a zillion places at the UW. But R.L. Morgan at Washington.edu is still the property of the University of Washington. As it turns out, I can most likely keep it for life, but that's the current policy, and it's UW that sets the policy on that. So, there is, as has been well expressed at this point in many venues, a strong interest of people to have it be their own thing, not it be, have it not be Google's thing, or Washington.edu's thing, or the government's thing, or anything. I mean, me, the identity that I express is mine somehow. Maybe that's the domain name that I feel like I own, even though it's probably really ultimately the property of ICANN, but have it be mine. And that's really technology independent, I would say, but is a real strong theme in that stuff. And the other is control of how information flows. So it's user-centric if the information that's passed between the parties that I'm dealing with goes through me, as opposed to being done in some back channel exchange between those places that I don't really have a view into or control over, right? So those are both important things. And I think really technology independent. I think a lot of technologies that we're doing are capable of supporting that stuff. A lot of it has more to do with policies of entities that are involved in the technology than the technology per se. That said, speaking for Internet 2 Middleware and the Shibboleth project, we are bullish on InfoCard. The idea that you can have really good internet identity with everything happening via a dumb browser just only takes you so far. Having the ability to have actual smart software in your browser that knows how to sign on to things, on your platform that knows how to sign on to things, really makes all the difference. So we have been even though some of the technical details in InfoCard and the identity metasystem and all that stuff are not necessarily what we would have chosen, the overall system seems like the best bet for actually moving things forward. So we are intending to support that in the Shibboleth product, where, again, not define exactly what that would mean, but ultimately being able to replace or supplement the current redirection-based, browser-based flow that I showed earlier, with an InfoCard-based flow retaining the same ability to send attributes and relying on the same infrastructure, federated infrastructure to support it that we enjoy now. So that's our goal with that stuff. OpenID. I'm sure there are big. How many people here have an OpenID? Everybody is. How many people have used it this week? Okay, a few. Not me. So OpenID gets a lot of buzz. Certainly, fine for many great use cases for which it has been applied. Don't really have time to get into its details now. From my point of view, having looked at it a fair amount, for the kinds of use cases that we are talking about, traditionally talking about in university space, the kinds of things we've been doing as Federation. Is it securable to do those things? Probably, but then it would essentially lose most of its appeal, because the user would start having to manage their own HTTPS website, et cetera. So OpenID 2.0 is supposed to solve many of these things. Will it actually take off and see adoption? Will the non-URL use cases, which are some of the interesting things in 2.0, actually see the light of day and be deployed by people in the world? Maybe. We'll see. I have my doubts. from my point of view, from the looking at what we're doing in higher ed, it's really the use cases here that rather than this exact technology, people want promiscuous interaction, right? Here's a site, it's never been in touch with or knows nothing about an identity provider, and they're able to interact and do something useful, right? Well, to some extent, that's a something for nothing proposition, right? If you really know absolutely nothing about them, then you can't tell the difference between a really good one that's supplying you really good stable users and the one that's providing you with all the spam. So, well, if you have to know something about them, then what do you do? Well, people are certainly already, as people are here probably aware, working on reputation systems to support that kind of discrimination. And I think in many ways that is what we are trying to build a portion of by building something for the higher education community, is to say, okay, here's a whole bunch of places that can participate in an open identity system that are universities. You may not like universities in general, but they are institutions in society, and they do represent a certain kind of reputation that is already out there that can be leveraged, as opposed to having to build it up from scratch. But are those promiscuous use cases ones that are important in research and education? They absolutely are, right? What do we do in research and education? We connect up researchers, educators, all around the world based on their interest in all kinds of obscure subjects, bring them together, and it's really important that be able to be done in a very loose, collegial, doesn't require contract setup kind of fashion, right? It has been done that way for a couple of thousand years already, I think, but it's important that continue in the online world. So those cases are not really being met very well by these more elaborate federations that we've set up to do the higher value things now. So if we want to be able to play in that space, and I think it's important that we do, we need to find some way to bridge that gap. On the other hand, the kind of stuff that we do, even if it's a loose collaboration among researchers, it's real stuff. Your reputation as a researcher is, it's your career, right? If your research is trashed by somebody who stole your ID because they did a DNS poisoning attack, then that's a big problem, right? So, or if they get access to that expensive resource that you got from the NSF. So we can't say that all of those are low-value cases. ePortfolio, let me just touch on very quickly the notion that a student's stuff should be, what students want to be able to do is collect all their stuff throughout their academic career someplace and say, here's my stuff, here's my academic stuff. This is a very big deal in the education space these days. People are trying to design systems to support this. Where is that stuff going to live? What's going to be the identity of that place, of you when it's your stuff at that place? Is it going to be the last university you attended? Is it going to be the identity you started with in elementary school that carries on all the way through? Don't know. These are very significant questions. And running short of time, I want to get to our next topic, but all this stuff can be hooked together in fascinating ways. I did a demo at a meeting over the summer where I went to an OpenID-enabled website, was redirected to an OpenID provider that was InfoCard-enabled, signed on to that with an InfoCard that was a managed card, so ultimately I went back and signed on at my university using Basic Auth, right? So, we can chain these things together in really cool ways, and we have absolutely no idea what's happening by the end of that, right? And people want to do that. It's really enabling to be able to do these things. But what have you got, And when you're done with that, user support, assurance, all that stuff. So we have many. The nice thing now is that we have many identity tools that are in our hands, and the interesting thing is what are going to be the useful ways to put them together. Okay, so just our final thing here about collaboration and all the different things. So this is a big area of work for us now. We observe that higher ed collaborations tend to involve several different kinds of tools all at once. That wiki I showed, for example, mailing lists, chat, video conference, et cetera, all those things have to be managed independently for many collaborative activities, virtual organizations that are supporting these things. That's a huge burden, and it becomes an impossibility to support a large collaborative, distributed, federated activity using that stuff. So we're trying to make a change in that. A lot of our peer organizations supporting research and education around the world are working on the same kind of stuff. Let me just go right to this. We have a project called CoManage, which is bringing together some group and privilege management tools that we had been targeting for more enterprise space before, Federation enabling them, applying them to this suite of collaboration tools, hoping to do some demos and show how this stuff can actually improve management of access to resources, make it enabled for real virtual organizations, show some of that stuff happening at Internet 2. And obviously, as we look at things like Google Apps for Education and how universities federate into those spaces and think about real federated cases there, where I'm not just going to the University of Washington instance of Google Apps for Education, but somebody from some other university federates in to look at my calendar or share an email inbox or whatever. Those are the kind of things that we really want to, we're excited about enabling with the kind of applications that you guys are developing, and trying to take advantage of the identity infrastructure that we're building. So, and again, showing examples of doing that kind of thing with tools that we're building. So, I think that's probably about it. And we wanted to leave a little time for questions, so we have a few minutes.
Yeah. Let me just.
That was a fire hose of stuff.
I want to expand a little bit on this last point about when you plumb an application for collaboration and federation. University of Missouri has Shibbolized SharePoint, and SharePoint is certainly a widely used collaboration tool. And it's wonderful that you can use your federated identity from your enterprise to get into the SharePoint server. And all life is all good until you want to use one aspect of SharePoint, which is revving up a desktop application. And that desktop application has got to understand a federated space. And in the case of Microsoft's products, no. So understand that there are layers here that we're going to go through. We're going to get quickly to have you be able to access content on a shared server, but then to exploit the applications underneath to use that is a different trick. And I appeal to you guys as really smart people who do applications to make sure that your applications can understand life in a federated space. And it's more than just federated identity. It's living in that almost DCE type world that's out there. What?
Case of death.
AFS type world out there. How about that?
AFS, yeah, AFS is cool. Who else loves AFS? Come on. There must be some people out there.
So let's go into Q&A. We have time for a couple of questions.
Hi there. I'm wondering if you could compare what InCommon is doing to some other commercial identity federation services, if there are any. If you could comment on that.
Commercial identity federation services. Are you asking if there are any, or do you have some in mind?
Well, I know there are identity vendors like Ping Identity.
So,
yeah,
but
yeah, let me. In fact, I had coffee with Andre Durand a couple of weeks ago about this space, and he reported.
CTO, I think.
He's the CEO actually of Ping Federate and Ping ID. They have a lot of installations out there, 125 in the Fortune 500s. Every single one of those installations is bilateral. Every single one of those is we've outsourced travel, we've outsourced payroll, whatever. And he knows that that's not a real path forward.
Do you know what I mean by bilateral? It's, this company makes an arrangement with that company, they share keys, set it up.
So there's no...
You do the next one, you set up another server that, do the next one, you set up another server. So.
And so you can count on a contractual base already, because you've done that partnership. You can count on the fact that you don't have to worry about what attributes they're permitted to deliver, because that's part of the contractual nature. Whereas when you move to a multilateral space, then you have to really question, is that enterprise really able to assert that somebody's a member of some other enterprise, for example. Or, and the enterprise viewpoint is, why should I give those attributes out to these people? So a lot of stuff creeps in when you hit multilateral. Everybody, I think now in the commercial space is understanding that the long-term path is multilateral. That's why Liberty glommed onto us so passionately, is because we're doing the multilateral federations, and that's where the end of the story will be. So what we know about are large numbers of bilateral commercial identity providers, as it were. We don't know of with the exception of Protect Network, and Ping Federate will probably join in common as an IDP, where in fact you might use your OpenID to get to Ping Federate, and then get out with a federated ID from Ping Federate as your identity provider, which leads to interesting questions about how can I add an LOA to an OpenID? Because I came in with a strong active authentication, perhaps to Ping Federate. How can I convey that information? So we don't know of any real use cases right now. Among the federations that are being constructed, perhaps the broadest is in the UK, where they intend to encompass all of higher ed, all of continuing ed, all of K-12, and now they're talking to the National Health Service. So that's going to be a very broadly scoped federation at that point, and we'll see how it tracks. I think we're keeping a more focused view on our federation with the idea that pairing is the answer between federations, and we have to nail that down.
I mean, I guess the one instance I know about of commercial identity providers actually is in service of the U.S. government e-authentication federation, where the whole point was to push identity management out from the government applications out to the usual ring of government contractors, and so there are some there serving that particular set, but to my knowledge, not serving any other markets. So it's a difficult space to be in, I think, as a business proposition. Liabilities unknown, but we'll see.
We want to be pretty blatant about our appeal here. You guys have always been leaders. You jumped onto federated identity really early on, and that's wonderful. Now we're talking about a richer identity management space where groups and privileges, et cetera, can be exchanged across this fabric. And our appeal to you is externalize as much as you can of identity management within your application space so that it can function in a federated world. There's smirks back there. No?
He smirked at me.
Oh.
Do you want to use the microphone?
Well, there's one thing that strikes me is you're talking about managing identity for universities. And it seems to me that Facebook has been doing that for you. They've been going around using email as identities for university students and built that out. So is that competition for you, or is that parallel? Is that not relevant at all?
Well, let's see. Is Facebook competition for us with identity management? I don't think so. I haven't heard of any universities that are saying, you can now sign into your course website with your facebook.com ID.
Well, but it's
are those services, are academic activities definitely moving out into the internet services? Absolutely, moving it. So it's not so much identity as the actual, the stuff itself. How many courses are doing stuff via Google Groups, right? A zillion, I'm sure, right? Is that a concern of universities? Absolutely. Is there a level of control that we think we need to have over that stuff? Well, in the ordinary course, maybe not. The one that's dealing with, I don't know, possibly medical information because it's a medical course. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, people moving serious work into Google Apps is a big deal, and that's people are working on contracts around that. that was sort of the point I was trying to make in the middle there about if we don't play in the broader internet sort of application space and via identity, then that stuff will just start to happen out there, and university identities will be good for looking at your paycheck and looking at your grades, and that'll be about it, right? And I think that'll be a lose. I think because I really think that when it comes to academics and that reputation point that I made, being out there with the fact that you are a professor at a university, I think should make a difference in all kinds of online activities, right? What kind of difference? Well, if we're building up reputation based on, who likes your blog comments, and that is determining your expertise about, the history of Azerbaijan. Well, how about actually being a professor of Azerbaijani history at some university? Wouldn't that help establish reputation in that sort of context? I think it would. How do we get there? We don't have any ways of digitally expressing that kind of thing today in a consumable fashion, but we're getting there. We could say is faculty now in a standardized fashion. So that's the kind of if we're going to serve our societal role here, that's what we need to do.
Another aspect of the Facebook situation, Kevin, is whether it's authoritative on any attributes. So one of the big businesses right now within InCommon is the assertion of studentness. That's huge. Facebook can't assert that you're a currently enrolled student in so-and-so. What we're seeing now is a vast marketplace from one of the companies in InCommon is student-only services. And they give you URL passes. One of the reasons we like them is their LOA is 0. Comfort level LOA, as it were. But they really want to know that you're an active student. Universities spend hundreds of thousands of dollars today to service those requests via fax, via email, via telephone. Imagine if you can have a dynamic
Probably still sending 9-track tapes to some place.
I suspect so. And wouldn't it be nice if we can give a real-time assertion that you're a student and preserve privacy in that prospect and a lot of other things. And that's turning out to be huge. And again, right. So it's not only universities as identity providers, but universities as definitive sources of authority for certain pieces of information. That's very important.
So, if Facebook really was obliged by legislation to assure that people were students, well.
Or made the distinction between alumni
or something,
and current students.
And understand, especially as Bob talked about some of the medical.
Then we start charging them.
Right? The medical applications that. There really is a regulatory life out there. We don't like it, but HIPAA, Graham-Leach-Bliley, Sarbanes-Oxley, all of this stuff is real. Lots of economics associated with it. We'd like to have an infrastructure that supports that, but could be diluted down to be flexible for the social networking environments, et cetera. But it seems very difficult to start at an OpenID level and ratchet up.
In defense of OpenID, a little. The thing about Facebook and the existing identity things have been built on email. And the problem with email is you're overloading a message sending mechanism. The nice thing about OpenID is you're overloading a URL, which means you can, once you've verified the URL, you can use that as a source for further information because it has a page there. So that means it can point into the rest of the system. So it seems like a subtle difference, but actually it's quite an important one. And obviously,
sure.
We like URLs at Google because we go around indexing them. But
right.
I think it's valuable for other people as well to say, okay, if that URL is on the university domain, it has a path there, and that points to the other services that can be fetched from it. And if you can attach those two, then there's some value there, I think.
Yeah, the notion of URLs being associated with identities as one portion of a set of identifiers, absolutely. I like URLs. Makes a lot of sense. Although, again, what about privacy aspects, right? If I have to have one of those that says everything about me in order to play certain kinds of games, in order to participate in certain kinds of activities, and if I choose not to have one, am I cut off? What sorts of things? what is the expectation of everybody being open about everything, due to people's legitimate interest in privacy. We need to bear that in mind.
Any other questions, guys? If not, final question, where can we talk about this stuff more? Do you have a slide on contact or?
A fine question.
Go to the InCommon website, go to the...
Yes, certainly we have a lot of material out there on InCommon and Internet 2. Our best university-oriented place for discussing identity management-related stuff is, oops, there's my screensaver. Nice bird in Australia. Talk to the bird. Is actually, there's an identity management list that's run out of EDUCAUSE, a larger organization that, good venues to talk about all this stuff are needed, actually.
And it's important to note that you're not an average company. We would give the average company answer of, join the email list, et cetera. You're Google, and that's really important to us. So if you want continued engagement, it's kjk@internet2.edu. How about that to cut through? And we'll find something because you are consequential. And we make, it's also remarkable to us and to the rest of the world that we have a project that Google and Microsoft are cooperating on. We want to keep that going.
Okay. Well, thanks, Bob and Ken.
Thank you.